The first reason you are a Republican is that you do not think it is a political party's job to make your life or the country better. Your only concern is doing harm to groups that are different from you. The Republicans are not a political party, but a death cult. So to those of you who think that I'm being too crass or mean, I don't care. This party is literally destroying the world, and I'm not going to hold your hand for you to understand that reality.
I don't think you're being mean. I just think that people with incredibly simplistic opinions like my opponent is literally Hitler are people who aren't that smart. Yes, there are Republicans who are bad, just like there are Democrats who are bad, but blatantly saying that all conservatives are either stupid or evil is something a 14-year-old would say.
Have you ever heard a Republican campaign on actual policies on how to improve things like healthcare, housing, or living wages? Of course not.
Yes, they do all the time. Lowering the cost of everything was one of Trump's major campaign promises.
Inflation is destroying our country. We will target everything from car affordability to housing affordability to insurance costs to supply chain issues to the price of prescription drugs. We're going to bring energy prices down.
Now, whether a president or a specific politician can actually achieve that depends on the person, but to say they never talk about these things is incredibly negligent on his part in terms of research. Anyway, this is a new rising star channel called No Way, No How, and it's spelled creatively, so it's incredibly difficult to remember. Smart move. No Way, No How, who also goes by Alex, runs a channel that covers politics from a far-left perspective.
Right-wing governments should not exist.
And with the Mr. Beast retention bar at the bottom of any clip that might be slightly boring, so I'm sure you can guess who his target audience is. That being said, I can't help but notice as a creator that there are many channels on a particular side of the political spectrum that get tons of views despite having a very small subscriber base, and despite making videos that are really, really poorly written and fact-checked. And because of that, I would like to introduce you to the Hassan Piker radicalization pipeline.
Right, so it turns out Hassan has decided to watch a video from a channel with 3K subs. Basically what he does is he reacts to their videos and he artificially boosts their metrics, and they get spammed with a bunch of positive comments from his fans, and they're incentivized to glaze him even more.
Right, so what happens is that a far-left channel makes a video, Hassan reacts to it, and the video quickly blows up. Numerous reactions like this is actually how Noah Samson got famous. You might recognize Noah as the guy who is rightfully being sued for defamation by Ethan Klein. Well, that's old news. In more recent history, Hassan has found Alex's channel.
Forces carried out mass executions.
This is a really good video. Holy shit, dude. This guy's got 232 subs. This dude is definitely a Hassan Abiad. Let's see how many subs he got
left
since
and
we
right
started
extremism
watching.
as being
Damn,
equally evil
almost
and
2K subs. Let's go.
So Hassan reacts to a super small channel and it blows up, and then that channel gets into the content sphere of, my videos only do well if Hassan reacts to them, so I'm going to make the most radical shit possible. Well, in this case, the guy already had some pretty corrupt takes before Hassan came into the picture.
As the quote goes, borders are scars on the face of the planet.
But I actually do think a lot of creators know that Hassan does this, so they'll put him in the thumbnail, throw one of his friends in the video, and then preemptively say a bunch of radical stuff in the hopes that he will react. And you know, it's not a bad game plan considering that based on the research, Hassan's fans are largely single and live with their parents, so they have nothing better to do than watch every video on any channel that he recommends, especially if they have the same political ideology, and what it's led to is numerous channels who are so negligent in their research that I'm starting to think that the myriad of things that they get wrong are a lot more intentional than they are mistakes. This is what I mean.
The Republican Party currently holds all three branches of government. There is nothing holding back the party from doing literally anything they want. So what have the results been with 2 years of this mandate? A catastrophic failure of epic proportions. They have single-handedly destroyed America's soft power in the world. They've gutted all federal agencies that actually help your life by hiring an unelected, drug-addicted, billionaire loser man-child.
Which vital programs that help people's lives did Elon Musk and Doge cut? Where did he go wrong? Because all I saw him do is cut programs with names that sound so bullshit that they must have only been created to steal money. There's no way that this is actual research.
I'd like to read through a couple of the grants that Doge just pulled back. They pulled back a $1.5 million NIH grant to Morehouse College. It was called the Center to Advance Reproductive Justice and Behavioral Health among Black, pregnant, /postpartum women and birthing people. How about the conference, Gender Equity in the Mathematical Study of Commutative Algebra? Do you think that that's a valid form of government spending?
I think all kinds of government investment should be dedicated toward mathematical.
All kinds of government
scientific.
investment. You don't have any kind of limit on what we're spending our money on, just everything?
See what I mean? Anyway, Alex is going to go over a massive list of every perceived failure of Republicans, and I'm going to be honest, there's a lot here that I don't know that much about, so I'm just not going to address it. I'd rather stay inside of my expertise, and I don't think it's that big of a deal here, though, because inside of the stuff that I do know about, he is so horrendously wrong that I think it's very likely that everything he's saying here is just flat-out misinformation or has an extreme lack of nuance. For example,
they've redirected billions of dollars from renewable projects to fossil fuels when electrifying is literally cheaper than fossil fuels and our grid desperately needs energy.
Now, because I spent quite a number of hours researching this, I'm going to try to have a nuanced conversation instead of just saying my opponent is evil for liking solar panels, like Alex is trying to do with his opponents. However, I'm going to ignore wind turbines when it comes to renewables because I'm not really impressed with them.
The next base of support is big oil and natural gas. These corporations would like to make as much profit as possible from fracking and drilling U.S. fossil fuels, while at the same time axing any efforts to develop the U.S. transition to clean energy.
Drill, baby, drill.
They are largely behind the efforts canceling American renewable projects and massively delaying the transition to electric vehicles.
Yeah, I don't think that's entirely the case. Ironically, the drill baby drill clip was Trump talking about trying to lower the price of everything by lowering the price of energy. Now, before I get into why people might not want solar panels, I do want to remind everyone that contrary to the marketing, solar panels aren't clean technology. They actually cause quite a bit of pollution because they contain rare earth metals, and rare earth metals are toxic to dig and refine.
It's really because of the challenges, the heavy energy and resource and pollution risks that are associated with refining rare earth elements, that production has concentrated historically in so few places.
Processing rare earths often involves the use of solvents, which can produce toxic waste.
The other issue is that some rare earth deposits are radioactive. They include uranium and thorium.
I actually think that most people don't know that we get radioactive materials from the ground. They're naturally occurring. Funnily enough, as far as I'm aware, nuclear is the most environmentally friendly form of energy.
Amazingly enough, nuclear has the lowest carbon impact of all of them because you have to build the solar power and the wind power, and that requires energy that is currently not produced renewably. Nuclear energy is very safe.
Interesting. So here's the actual nuance, because my major issue is with Alex's claim that solar panels are cheaper than oil and gas, a claim that I was going to laugh at until I watched this video here talking about how the technology has gotten much better and how we can all navigate the logistical nightmares to the point where we can make solar panels much cheaper than gas and oil. Anyway, here's the issue. Solar panels are a spend a lot right now but save more money later type deal. It's actually the same problem with nuclear power. It's more expensive to build a nuclear plant than it is to build a fossil fuel power plant. They're like multiple times more expensive. So the hard sell is that during a time when people are financially struggling like crazy, you want to tell them, hey, I know you can barely afford anything right now, but we want to spend a lot of money making solar farms so that 10 years down the line, you can save money on your energy bill and your groceries. Also, you'll have to buy a new car for this plan to work, and you'll have to get rid of your gas stove. And people aren't going to logically process all of this. They'll just see the prices going up and not know why. Also, does anyone else find it weird that Alex was shitting on Elon Musk, the #1 electric car salesman in America, and he's only being outsold by China when it comes to worldwide sales? So if we're talking about charitability, why is there no grace given to Elon for at least promoting the technology that Alex wants?
A lot of people in the United States right now think any discussion of a political issue must have been bought and paid for by the other team. That's just not how any of this works.
Right. That was a very surprisingly down-to-earth thing for him to say during a 30-minute nonsense rant about ICE.
Those words were written about King George, but they might as well describe Donald Trump.
Outside of that, this was a great video on how technology works, and this is a great channel for learning that kind of stuff. And this kind of knowledge is important because a lot of people are so lacking in tech skills that they will fall for obvious scams like telling everyone that we can make roads out of solar panels.
Has anyone seen this video for solar freaking roadways?
Yeah!
I have seen the future, and it is solar freaking roadways.
Among the numerous problems with this idea, solar panels are made out of glass, and imagine trying to drive on glass in the rain. More importantly, solar technology has numerous roadblocks, and saying that your opponents are evil for being dismissive of solar without addressing the roadblocks is not a conversation, it's a radicalization technique. Speaking of that, Let's move on to the last point on his list that I'm going to cover.
They have supercharged a paramilitary organization composed of the dumbest, unqualified losers in society who roam the streets destroying countless communities and murdering people in both facilities and broad daylight.
Okay, so I had to censor a lot of that because it's full of stuff that will get you demonetized. Anyway, he's talking about ICE, and I gotta say that those are some incredibly strong claims that need evidence. And I say that because I've gone over every single event that leftists have brought up where they say that ICE was wrongfully deporting someone, and it turns out that person was rightfully being deported. Every situation I've researched where someone has died, it's because they were violently resisting arrest or actively attacking police. Pro tip, don't resist arrest, even if you're completely innocent. Actually, especially if you're innocent. In fact, this shit from people like Alex has been so egregious that I watched leftists blame ICE for the death of an American woman who was killed in a traffic accident that was caused by an illegal fleeing being deported. The illegal killed the woman, not the police, but the police get blamed for doing what we pay them to do.
The Republican support for ICE has been a perfect example of this mindset, as the constant cruelty and brutality on display hasn't made their lives better in any way or actually addressed any of the problems in their lives. All it does is offer them a spectacle of cruelty as an outlet for their own deteriorating conditions.
Bro, what the hell are you talking about? Cracking down on illegal immigration as well as deporting legal immigrants who refuse to assimilate and learn English absolutely benefits Americans. This is like the biggest issue in the country. It affects our voting because illegals get counted in the census, which artificially inflates the number of congressmen a state gets. It affects housing prices. It costs our welfare system more money because both immigrants and illegals take up welfare more often than natural-born American citizens. I mean, this guy supports Bernie Sanders, so I'm sure you can see where I'm coming from on this issue.
Open borders. That's a Koch brothers proposal. That's a right-wing proposal which says essentially there is no United States.
But it would make a lot of the global poor richer, wouldn't it?
And it'd make everybody in America poor. Then you're doing away with the concept of a nation state. What right-wing people in this country would love is an open border policy. Bring in all kinds of people who work for $2 or $3 an hour. That would be great for them. I don't believe in that.
If you're asking how illegals get welfare, the answer is anchor babies. Anchor babies qualify for welfare benefits, which is yet again another reason why we should abolish birthright citizenship. I mean, there are numerous ways that deporting every single illegal benefits society.
The Bush administration has done nothing to control the problem that we have. We've had 5 million undocumented workers come over the borders since George Bush took office. The reason the American people are concerned is because they are seeing their own economic position slip away. Employers are exploiting these undocumented workers. They're not paying the minimum wage. They're not observing worker safety laws.
The problem is that useful idiots who support illegal immigration don't know enough about the U.S. government to know things like what I previously mentioned, which is that illegals are counted in the U.S. Census, and sanctuary states use that to cheat in elections. You get more congressional votes when your state population is higher, so illegals are making it easier to increase the number of corrupt politicians in states that are willing to cheat. This not only makes it harder to select a president who accurately represents the values of genuine Americans, but also it makes it harder to pass good legislation in Congress and repeal bad legislation. This is why it's my personal opinion that we should be charging politicians who aid in illegal immigration with treason. I really think it's time to stop being passive about this stuff and start making people find out when they try to rig our system.
Who actually stands to benefit from this? All of these actions have been done on behalf of the Republican Party base, whose interests this party's elected members actually represent. This base is made up of 5 main groups. The first group being Silicon Valley tech oligarchs. This group is composed of egomaniacal libertarian billionaires who openly do not believe in democracy and want to usher in a form of techno-feudalism where they are the kings of their own personal fiefdoms, but at the same time not believing in any social programs or wealth redistribution. These tech oligarchs have completely bought the Republican Party and work hand in hand with this administration to achieve their vision.
If you pay attention to words like wealth redistribution, he's literally saying that Silicon Valley giants are all Republicans now, because they aren't communists and because they did what big business owners have always done, which is sit down with the president. But Jeff Bezos, the Washington Post guy, is right-wing now? The guy who financed woke Lord of the Rings with black dwarves? The guy who owns Twitch, the platform that bans everyone that's slightly right of Marx? Even Elon Musk is not a Republican, nor is RFK. They're both classical liberals who were pushed out of the Democratic Party because of all the radicalism. Alex is even accusing Mark Zuckerberg, the guy who was censoring any pro-Trump message in 2020 on Facebook. That guy is right-wing, and he even accuses Bill Gates, the anti-natalist global warming guy. He's a conservative? You've got to be fucking kidding me. How far left are you if Bill Gates is on the right? Well, here's the cherry on top when it comes to that giant list of all the failings of the Republican Party.
Everything I just mentioned there was purely what I could recall from memory when writing this. There's a ton of things I could have mentioned, but there's just too many things to list, and they're literally all bad and making your life worse. There is no good news coming from this administration.
Right, just what I thought. He's flat out admitting that he simply wrote out this giant list and didn't research any of it. And I know he didn't because it would take months to fact check all of these claims to make sure they're 100% genuine failures of the Republican Party, with no nuances that would detract from his overall point that Republicans are a pure evil death cult. Research and fact-checking is the most time-consuming part of this job, to the extent where I purposefully will not start research-heavy topics late in the month, because I know I won't finish them before the month is over. Not that research matters to his audience. Based on the Mr. Beast retention bars, you can tell his target audience is radicals who don't care about research, they just want to hear someone else repeat their ideas, or he's targeting young people who don't know any better because they're like 16 years old. So for those who don't know the tricks yet, you can tell when someone is not fact-checking because they won't give specific examples, and they'll get stuff horrendously wrong. On top of that, let me just say that anyone can make people think they fact-check stuff by putting some graphs on screen or saying some numbers like this.
Republican politicians purposely imposed limits to New Deal-era access to education. As Roger Freeman, advisor to both Nixon and Reagan, warned, we are in danger of creating an educated proletariat. These Republican policies succeeded as today 54% of US adults and over 130 million people read below a 6th grade level.
Holy shit, that Ronald Reagan part was so deceptive. He cut off the most important part of the quote. I guess he thought nobody would ever look it up. First of all, Reagan's advisor was talking about college. He wasn't talking about trying to make it so people can't read. Second, and more importantly, this guy, Roger Freeman, was correct. He said we need to be selective about who we allow to go to college, otherwise we'll have a large number of highly trained unemployed people. That's exactly what's happened, and on top of that, these unemployed people, or low-wage workers, are in a crippling amount of student debt that they wouldn't have if they didn't waste time getting a degree that was useless. Now, as for the stuff about reading proficiency, let's have a conversation that's going to be uncomfortable for modern audiences. In a prior video, I showed the kind of stats that are oddly, progressively getting harder to find, which is statistics that are separated by race. Why does race matter? Well, it's because each race has different cultural values, and I'm sure that Alex will have no problem with me talking about race in this way, because I found a video where he essentially masturbates to the idea of America losing a war to China.
The overwhelming reality is that the United States military is not built for the 21st century and would certainly lose in the event of a conflict with China. The seventh and final major reason why China would decisively win this conflict is that the Chinese would have an infinitely larger will to fight this war than America. I'm going to show you 2 clips right now. I want you to tell me which group you believe is going to fight this to the last person and die for their country.
So in this video, he praises the solidarity of the Chinese army and then shows footage revealing that China is a massive ethno-state versus an American multicultural army that he says is weak-willed. I'm sure the Twitter racist will love that irony. So if we're talking about reading, and we remove black people, Mexicans, and I imagine the vast number of foreigners who have zero interest in learning English, national reading levels drastically improve. Gee, I wonder why that is. Well, fortunately, Alex has another Why Conservatives Are Evil video to explain these discrepancies.
At the core of the conservative person's thinking, the feeling that guides their politics is fear. The first fundamental error of moderate conservatives is blaming and addressing the symptoms rather than the root cause. Conservatives insist on addressing the symptoms of the problem with harsher and harsher policies, never trying to actually heal it or even acknowledge it's even there. This is because the root cause of problems in society are material, meaning the lack of basic necessities and financial instability.
Got it, so you're a communist. You could have just started with that. Well, and a propagandist considering the "it's only conservatives who fearmonger" line of argumentation, ignoring that a bunch of leftists fearmongered everyone into shutting down the entirety of society for multiple years, as well as tried to fearmonger everyone into mandatory vaccination. But okay, his argument is that people don't do well because they don't have enough materials.
In low-income neighborhoods, schools are severely underfunded, leaving students with few resources and limited opportunities.
He's saying that blacks and Mexicans have low levels of education because their schools are underfunded. Now, I'm going to ignore the irony of him complaining about education levels after he said that we must import infinite illiterate third worlders, so I can continue talking about a topic that's even more uncomfortable for modern audiences by saying, does this guy know anything about the culture of the low-income black community? They don't value education, that's why they read at a level of a first grader, and they talk like they've never had a grammar lesson in their entire life. How many additional resources do you need to learn how to read and do math? You have electricity, running water, shelter. A ton of you have air conditioning. Hell, food is so cheap in America that some of the poorest people in this country could go multiple months without eating and get healthier. And last, you have a library of infinite information on your phone. Do you know how many people in history would have lost their shit over the ability to fully educate themselves with just a cell phone? Though not to remove the nuance of the cost of living going up and how unhappy I am about that, but to pretend that the poorest person in America isn't still incredibly wealthy compared to people of the past or the rest of the world is ridiculous. This "we need more resources" line of thinking is a retarded argument that communists love to use to devalue the importance of culture, which is what is actually causing all these discrepancies.
Within a large radius, the only affordable food options are fast food chains like McDonald's and Subway, offering little beyond highly processed foods.
Yo, I finna be keeping it real right now. Let me be 100. You're gonna tell me that people who season their food with baby powder and go crazy over pineapple dipped in Kool-Aid give two shits about the quality of their local food options?
Trying the pineapple, the Kool-Aid pineapple. $12 small jar, ain't nobody making them like this. What it tastes like? Ooh! Oh, Lord!
The most racist person on 4chan could not have thought of this trend. On top of that, the reason why they only have McDonald's and liquor stores in the hood is because doctors and engineers keep stealing from department stores, so the owners don't want to take the financial risk of putting their business there. Also, have you ever listened to black music before? They literally have songs that teach people how to get away with stealing from Walmart so they can resell what they stole. Not only that, they teach these songs to their kids. Who the hell lets their kids listen to a song that gives them instructions on how to rob stores and then thinks it's cute to let them sing it on the way to Disneyland? And by the way, this is one of the most vanilla YouTube-safe videos that I have. Go onto Twitter and you'll see these people teaching their kids much worse. And clearly they aren't incredibly impoverished if they can afford Disneyland. So you expect business owners to want to take a risk on serving this community?
They might be completely right that a person is acting immorally or making wrong decisions, but focusing on immoral decisions as the main things that need to be changed without addressing the material conditions around them ensures that the problem will never change. When people are not getting their basic needs met and are not living dignified lives, they are always more likely to commit crime and antisocial behavior.
This is why I said that Alex is a communist, because communists never understand the fundamentals of economics or how money works. Money is an abstraction that represents trade. The reason why we have dollars instead of a bartering system is because it's a lot faster to trade $40 for a pair of shoes instead of trying to go find something like a chicken to exchange for a pair of shoes. We couldn't have all this crazy technology if we didn't have a simple way of trading and making transactions quick. So essentially, when you make a lot of money, it means that a lot of people want to trade for whatever you have. When you don't make a lot of money, it means that you don't have a skill that's valuable or something worth trading for, or you're an asshole who people don't want to interact with. These things are fueled by culture. It is culture that teaches you the value of sticking through how much of a pain in the ass it is to educate yourself. It's culture that teaches you how to talk to others and be likable, and it's culture that teaches you how to not waste money on stupid shit. And by that, I mean that it's very easy to be broke even if you make a lot of money. Watch a little Caleb Hammer and you'll see a ton of people on that show with huge incomes that are in more financial trouble than people who live in the ghetto.
It's pretty easy to make a list of problems and then propose a solution that would solve all of them, as long as you don't look too hard or know too much. And I'm sorry, but big simple solutions are very rare because everything is very complicated.
Right. Alex is basically saying that giving people more money through communism will solve all of their problems, but in reality that's not going to work because their problems are more complicated than that. These issues are not economic, they're cultural. And what's really disgusting to me is all the communist propagandists out there like this guy who are routinely lying to black people about the value of culture so they can never make their way out of the hood.
There's a reason why you don't see crime in rich communities. It's not because of the inherent traits of the people that inhabit them. It's because they have basic material conditions met. They are not forced into committing crimes or immoral actions out of necessity.
This is a chicken or the egg problem. The bad culture precedes the lack of money, not the other way around. As for what he said about low crime rates in rich communities, well, that's because people who are middle class and up tend to see street crime as immoral and bad for the cohesiveness of their community, whereas people in the hood feel entitled to be able to commit crime. It's not a crime of necessity when you put soda in a water cup or dine and dash on a bill. There are so many changing consumer habits caught on camera from this particular segment of the black community, and you can't change someone's culture by giving them more money. In fact, giving people free money tends to make their lives worse, especially if they're addicts. Excess wealth can kill an addict, but I don't think genuinely helping impoverished communities is the point for these influencers. My demeanor towards the Hassan Piker types or the Noah Samsen types has changed quite a bit after Charlie Kirk was murdered and people cheered on his death. And my demeanor continues to change as I watch things like an innocent white high schooler getting murdered for asking a black kid to change seats, followed by the black community cheering on the murderer, rewarding the murderer with $500,000, swatting the family of the victim multiple times, and creating a viral TikTok dance making fun of the white kid being killed. A lot of people are waking up to how incredibly racist certain parts of the black community are. There's a section of that culture that's rotten, and in my personal experience, no one is more mad at this section of the culture than other black people who have to live right next to those who behave like this. It's the Noah Samsons, the Hassans, and the Alexes of the world who are helping enable the hood behavior. And to further make that point, allow me to bring up a video that Alex made about horseshoe theory called Why the Far Right is Always Worse Than the Far Left. If you don't know what horseshoe theory is, Ryan Long made a video about it a while back.
When me and Brad first met, I didn't think we'd get along, but turns out we kind of agree on everything. Your racial identity is the most important thing. Everything should be looked at through the lens of race.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke.
Basically, horseshoe theory states that people on the extremes of the right and the left actually have a lot in common. They come to the same conclusions, but for different reasons. So in this video, Alex talks about which one is worse, right-wing violence or left-wing violence.
Far-left groups are typically diverse, and there really isn't an out group. Everyone is generally accepted except for the far right. Leftists seldomly commit acts of terrorism. They never intentionally target innocent civilians.
This is a straight-up lie. Political radicalism and terrorism from the left is exceedingly common. There are massive riots yearly caused by leftists. This year we had the ICE riots in January. Last year we had more ICE riots in July. For the past 10 years, we've had numerous riots from Antifa and BLM, the biggest one being the summer of 2020 riots. There's also been numerous political assassinations or assassination attempts that were carried out by leftists. I think they've tried to kill Trump 4 different times, and there's an entire movement on social media where radical leftists are trying to bait a mentally ill person into killing the president. There was a successful attempt on Charlie Kirk carried out by a leftist. There was a successful assassination a few months before that on Melissa Hortman of Minnesota, of all places, that was carried out by a former staffer of Tim Walz. Coincidentally, Melissa Hortman's murder was extremely close to her voting no on a bill that wanted to give medical care to illegals. Again, this was done in Minnesota, the Somali capital of America, where they were stealing a bunch of taxpayer money through leering centers. It's also the same place where ICE found out that like half of them were illegals. Last, leftists tried to assassinate Brett Kavanaugh and caused a riot when he was confirmed as a Supreme Court justice. So violence from radical leftists is rampant in America, and Alex's counterexample of right-wing violence is, of course, to bring up Charlottesville because that's the only example they ever have. That shit was nearly a decade ago. Surprisingly, he didn't mention January 6th. He then brings up the KKK, which is funny because they were Democrats.
The Ku Klux Klan terrorized and killed tens of thousands in a campaign of racist violence and terrorism.
And finally, he brings up a Wikipedia page, and of course, again, he doesn't really go into any specific detail for any of them because then people would find out that these examples of political violence were like a person who shot people who also happened to have a MAGA hat in his house.
When it comes to violence, far-left extremists have much different targets and philosophy compared to the far right. They're not out targeting random civilians or marginalized groups. They're going after fascists or the state.
Which is literally anyone who disagrees with them, because anyone with a different opinion, including other liberals, are called far right. I mean, you're even doing that in a smaller way by saying numerous liberals are actually conservatives.
Antifa is the common boogeyman and is painted as the worst of leftist extremism, the left's version of a school shooter.
I mean, the left has mass shooters too.
Unless you are a fascist or a Nazi, which we can all hopefully agree are universally bad ideologies, you have nothing to fear. Their violence is directed towards fascists so that they can never feel comfortable enough to march openly and attack minority groups.
Got it. Murder is okay as long as the person is a state employee, and if you're on the right, you have nothing to worry about because Antifa only violently attacks Nazis. Except they call everyone who disagrees with them a Nazi.
Never feel threatened by a far-left person. Unless you are an open racist or Nazi, which I hope you shouldn't feel concerned for, then you are within the 99% of people who are not a target. Far-right people are jaded, antisocial, violent, openly misogynistic, and racist. They are insecure and full of hatred. They are inherently dangerous and nihilistic. Identity politics and left messaging can be cringe and annoying, but like what's worse? There's a good Stavros joke about this that I can't remember exactly, but it goes something like, the left extremist person at worst might look strange to you, have a weird hair color, and be annoying. At least they want what's best for you, and they're definitely not going to hurt you. I'll take that any day of the week over some guy with an AR-15.
What do you mean? Antifa carries AR-15s. Seriously, has this guy done any research on this stuff? He's trying to run cover for a literal domestic terrorist organization, yet conservatives are evil? And let me be clear, I'm not doing any of this justice because I'm trying to only stick to things that are relevant to this topic, but make no mistake, if I was reacting to Alex's videos live, I would have to pause like every 10 seconds to debunk the numerous factually incorrect things he says constantly. Again, in my opinion, this is intentional. I think that much like Hassan Piker, he is intentionally trying to spread approval of political violence as long as it comes from the side that he agrees with.
All roads lead to Hassan being a piece of shit.
The reality is that when it comes to the far right or the far left, it doesn't matter what flavor of these you are, both groups of extremists suck. So if you're saying that you'd rather have one over the other, then I can only see that as an endorsement of violence from that extremist side. On top of that, here's something I've noticed after looking at his catalog and after watching most of the videos that he's released, since there aren't that many. Take a look at some of these titles. Of course, I've already mentioned the video Why China Would Smoke the US in a War. Then we have The Only Solution for Taiwan is Peaceful Reunification. After that is Everything You've Been Told About Hong Kong is Wrong. And last but not least, What China Would Be Like Without Communism. A video where Alex speaks very highly of communism, and I kid you not, he says he loves China's 1984-style mass surveillance and free speech restrictions.
Most Chinese people value safety and stability over the minor sacrifice of perceived freedom. China has proven that Western neoliberal democracy is not one size fits all. In this alternative government, you might have the freedom to talk shit about your government online about how shitty they are from your slum outside Shanghai, or you could live in the current world where a vast majority of the things that you would be complaining about would already be solved. For all the flack that China gets for its surveillance, China is incredibly safe for it, and the vast majority of Chinese people don't mind at all. The sacrifice that you make to have surveillance is one that Chinese people are okay with and are willing to trade for the massive amount of freedom granted by safety. Being able to go about your day without fear of crime at all times is a massive freedom that most Westerners don't have.
Weird, because Japan was able to achieve high levels of safety without constantly filming everything. I like how he talks about how no one is complaining about surveillance right after he talks about how there's no free speech in China. So I'm noticing a pattern of behavior here, and it's a pattern that numerous other people have noticed too.
Are we dealing with paid traitors that are being funded by the Communist Party of China to put out Chinese propaganda and CCP talking points, and at the same time denigrate the West? They're being paid to do the government fluff pieces. So if you ever see a video on them about like, wow, look how China's housing so many people. Wow, China's farmlands are amazing. Wow, look at the infrastructure. That's all paid for. That's all nonsense. So you can just, understand where it's coming from.
So the great thing about the internet is that it removes the financial barrier to entry that media used to have, and it allows anyone to become a popular figure and criticize whatever they want with very minimal censorship compared to legacy media. This has been an excellent benefit to society. However, the benefits of the internet do not come without cost. One of them being that the lack of a barrier to entry, as well as the gatekeeping, as well as the limited access to international media that previous generations had, also makes it incredibly easy for foreign countries to influence the politics of America. I've talked before about Westerners going over to Japan to promote leftism in other videos, and the reason I did that was so people would watch those videos and read between the lines and think, hey, what foreign countries are trying to influence the US? Well, one of them is China. This video was made by Serpenza 5 years ago, and he does give some examples of paid shills, but actually, this is such a common thing that I don't even need to use his examples of Chinese shills to make my point because I have my own. This is Jason, and he runs a channel called Living in China, and when you go to his channel page, you notice that literally every video is like, China is the best country in the world.
This is crazy. I've seen driverless cars, but never a driverless truck carrying containers. We're now at the Chuanshan container terminal of the Ningbo Zhoushan port. Two massive wind turbines spinning steadily and solar panels blanketing warehouse rooftops. They generate nearly 30 million kilowatt hours of clean electricity each year.
China's game-changing port of the future. America is done. Now, I happen to have watched this video, and it absolutely has nothing to do with America. He just wrote that in the title to, I imagine, shit on the West, because what these propagandists have to do is make China seem like a utopia and the West seem like a shithole.
In my conscience, I have already become Chinese. It's fucking sick. You have 1950s Soviet-era building blocks, next to the Gucci store. You have met me at a very Chinese time in my life, Chad.
But of course, Jason, or living in China, is not American. He's British, and every so often he returns to England with his Chinese wife and his Chinese green card, and when he makes content there, he does nothing but talk about how bad England is.
Welcome back to Broken Britain.
Look at the trash. Oh my god, look at the state of this. How old is this train even? Oh my god, look at all this chewing gum on the floor. And some more homeless people.
I want to go back to China already. You got to use cash. Look at this outdated system. Got to use cash.
I mean, this video is essentially 20 minutes of him saying that England is the worst place in the world, and he's made it multiple times.
I think it's just after I've been living in China for 13 years that I've got used to their insane infrastructure, the pristine, clean streets, the efficiency of everything. And then you just come back to here, and it's just like, it's as if we've gone back in time 20 years. Everything's grim. I mean, just look at this. You might think that it's nighttime. It's 3 p.m. Why is it dark like this? What's going on?
Pro, this guy stubs his toe and he'll say it was caused by the fall of the West. Now, I'm not going to say that England doesn't have its problems, but also, ironically, he's complaining about Britain being ugly on one of the most photogenic and clean streets I've ever seen. I've also noticed that his channel does okay, but not well enough to afford some of the luxuries that I've seen in his videos. And what I mean by that is that the travel fees alone probably cost more than the video makes, or cut significantly into the portion of income that he would take home. His monthly views aren't that great, yet this guy is flying his whole family business class on an international flight.
Cheers to China.
I mean, this has to be like $10,000 in plane tickets. There's no way he's paying for that on YouTube ad revenue and the occasional sponsor. Here's something else that's interesting.
I have a question. Why is it that these very pro-CCP, anti-Western YouTubers can't speak Chinese?
And although I don't speak a lot of Chinese, I've had some real fun times with Chinese people.
I'm not joking. This is true. They can't speak a lick of Chinese. If you are living in a country like China where English is very few and far between, unless you live in some big first-tier city, you kind of need to know Chinese to get around, so it's kind of bizarre that these guys haven't learned just even the basics, other than like ni hao and, you know, I need a beer or whatever it is.
Wow, that's weird. I wonder where I've seen that before. A leftist foreigner moves to an Asian country, does nothing but glaze tourist areas, and tries to cover up societal problems that are inconvenient for the government. They aren't all British, are they?
How is it that you can claim to know anything about a culture and a country if you cannot speak the language? Especially when you don't have transparent news coming out of said country that's translated into your language.
Right, or how are you supposed to comment on things like politics if you don't speak the language? Now, I've looked around on Jason's channel, and I've had a friend who is incredibly good at Chinese also look around Jason's channel, and we can't find any examples of him speaking Chinese for more than a sentence or two. Usually he just says single words like thank you.
This is 特朗普。你觉得他怎么样？
Trump? American president?
Oh, you speak English?
Yeah. 是总统吗？美国总统对不对？美国也挺好的呀。挺好的是吧？
He did do an interview on Chinese TV. Actually, he's done multiple interviews on Chinese TV. But of course, those are in English. Again, this sounds familiar. So like I said with Chris Broad and Trash Taste, there are so many people who pretend to be fluent in a language despite being nowhere near it, that unless there are explicit examples of them speaking a lot of that second language, I tend to think that their proficiency is not that high. Plus, Asian languages like Japanese and Chinese are so hard to learn for an English speaker that if you spoke it, you definitely would be showing it off in videos, and every person who I know who can has done that. It's actually something I've been waiting to do with Japanese, but I'm not quite there yet. Now, when it comes to politics, here's my point. How do you make tons of videos saying that China is the greatest place on the planet if you can't actually fact-check any of the complex information in the language of the country that you're talking about? Here's what I mean. I've mentioned before that Chris Broad, as well as many other people, are saying that Japan has a huge birthing crisis, and because of that, there are many job openings, and the only way to fill them is to dilute Japanese culture with foreigners.
The number of foreigners working in Japan hits an all-time high.
It's quite a cool thing to see. Much needed, given the decline of population, because there just aren't enough young people in Japan to fill all the jobs, the vacancies that are popping up in convenience stores and restaurants and whatnot.
Now, recently I just so happened to see one of those I'm Japanese and my life sucks videos. For some reason, it's a popular form of misery porn content that was started by a channel called Ask Japan. Anyway, this YouTuber makes an interesting point about the Japanese job market.
One of my viewers asked me, isn't it easy to find a job in Japan? It's true that there are many job openings, but the truth is, most of them are black companies that treat people badly, or unstable temp job with no future.
If you don't know what a black company is, it's basically Japanese slave labor. They make you work ridiculous hours, they pay you very little, and if you try to quit, they'll incessantly harass you and try to make it very hard for you to find new employment. So her claim is that yes, there are a lot of job openings in Japan, but most of them are slave labor jobs from abusive companies. And by the way, I'm going to give a very lukewarm take here by saying that I think a major cause of the Japanese birthing crisis is the ridiculous overtime hours that lots of Japanese people work. So you have a company that's incredibly toxic, Japanese people don't want to work there, and if that was left alone, what would naturally happen is that business would either die because they have no workers, or they would have to change their policies to encourage more Japanese people to join. However, thanks to endless foreigners from China and South Asia, we now have people who will fill those slave labor positions who are easy to mislead because they aren't native speakers of Japanese, and because they don't have citizenship rights. What if it's the case that bringing in tons of foreigners to fill in those job openings is actually helping enable companies to enforce toxic work hours because they can just hire a foreigner if Japanese people don't want to work there, and thus the crazy overtime hours must stay? It could be the case that the thing that they're trying to use to cure the birthing crisis is actually making it worse because it's lowering the bargaining power of Japanese workers to the extent where they can't bargain for enough free time to build families. How would someone like, say, Chris Broad be able to research these things before he talks about it on his podcast if he can't read or speak Japanese on a level higher than a kid in elementary school? I mean, I can't fact check it either yet, so this is just guesswork on my end, but bringing this full circle and back to the US, this is why I say that language proficiency is important when it comes to America, and this is why I think our standards for citizenship rights from naturalization are too low. Not only should you have to have lived in America for 10 years, you should also have to pass a high-level English proficiency test that includes speaking, reading, and writing, because when you become a citizen, you get the right to vote, and you should not be allowed to vote if you don't speak English at the level of an adult. Now, for nuance, let me just say that yes, you already have to pass an English test to become a citizen in the US, but the standards are a complete joke. Look at these typical questions that are asked. Can you tell me your name? Can you read one sentence? Do you have any questions? Are you fucking kidding me? Any beginner language learner could answer these questions, especially because you can just memorize them. This is multiple years of English study away from the language proficiency of an adult. How is it that the government can figure out how to give us all these advanced English tests just to get out of high school, but the standard for passing a citizenship test is, can you tell me your name? I mean, even for the high school exit exam, you have to write a full essay, but for a citizenship test, a test that gives you voting rights, you just have to read and write one sentence? One of the responsibilities of a citizen is jury duty. Is this enough language proficiency to determine if someone is guilty of a crime or not? Anyway, going back to China, take a look at this.
Money drives us all, but to some, it means more. Money can be enough to sell your reputation, even your very identity, who you are deep inside. Enter the white monkey job. With Chinese products, it's well known that quality has never been the main accolade for the term made in China. However, if Chinese people see that not only was the product or company made by someone overseas, but also consumed by foreigners, the perceived value of the product skyrockets. Food safety and quality is a huge issue in China, and people are all too aware of the scandals involving fake ingredients, tainted gutter oil, the dangerous addition of chemicals, etc. So having a foreigner be the CEO of a Chinese food company can not only dupe potential customers into thinking that a product is safe, but also that classy foreigners like Richard from England even use it.
I am Richard from England, European General Agent of the Ginger Boss. I am a very demanding person for food.
You know, I've been watching nonstop videos for about a week of people talking about how incredible of a place the tourist areas in China are, But I have to say that isn't it interesting that Chinese people see their own kind as so untrustworthy that they have to pay a white person to say a product is good or people won't buy it? I mean, also in America, the words made in China tend to mean that the product is low quality. One more thing before I go back to Alex, which is that in China, it is illegal to go on YouTube. However, the Chinese government is not stupid. They know that people can just use a VPN or whatever to access YouTube. So a part of this white monkey job YouTuber strategy is to flood YouTube with Westerners saying that China is great and the West is bad. Notice how Jason's videos have Chinese subtitles on them. Who are those for? Why would a Westerner be expecting Chinese people who don't speak English to be watching his content if YouTube is blocked in China? So a part of the target audience for content like this is Chinese people who got around the firewall.
If local Chinese people do manage to get outside of the Great Firewall of China on the internet and they start looking up YouTube videos and things about China, if they come across these guys spouting the Communist Party propaganda, they will then reinforce what they think about China. They want that reinforcement to go back. So they want a local Chinese person to go outside the Great Firewall, watch a video about China, and there's a foreigner saying, what the Chinese government is doing is 100% correct, it's amazing, the West is bad. And they're like, wow, our government was right all along, you know? But more importantly, they take these videos that these Westerners make, and then they take them from YouTube, they interview them and stuff, and they put them onto CGTN, CCTV, all the local big state-run media in order to, once again, push this narrative and add credence to what the Chinese government is saying.
Now, I really don't care what China does when it comes to propagandizing their populace. That's none of my business, and it's their issue to resolve, not America's. What I do care about, though, is them trying to use paid shills to influence Western politics. Going back to Alex, Mr. White Savior of all the minority communities in America, which is really funny considering all the China content because Chinese people are notorious for being racist against black people.
I was, however, incredibly shocked when moving to China to see just how blatantly open racism was. For instance, when introducing myself to Chinese people, I would be asked where I'm from. When I would say that I was South African, I would 100% of the time get a very confused, "but you're not black" response. And, you know, after a lengthy explanation as to why I wasn't black, I'd usually get a "good, because black people are bad" type of response. This was the attitude of the vast majority of people in mainland China.
But speaking of all this, I find Alex's channel to be very suspicious, and I think it's designed to demean all of American politics, not just Republicans. Leftists are simply the most likely people to agree with communism, but make no mistake, he shits on Democrats too, unless they're a domestic terrorist organization like Antifa.
The centrist Democratic Party is just as supportive of these conservative right-wing policies towards crime.
We must take back the streets. It doesn't matter whether or not the person that is accosting your son or daughter or my son or daughter, my wife, your husband, my mother, your parents. It doesn't matter whether or not they were deprived as a youth. It doesn't matter or not whether or not they had no background that enabled them to become socialized into the fabric of society. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons.
Damn, Biden used to be based before he became a vegetable. Holy shit, that guy had a bigger fallout than Don Lemon. But the only politician I've seen Alex compliment is the communism-friendly politician Bernie Sanders. Now, going back to what I was saying about language, for nuance, I will say that, shockingly, there actually is a video I found of Alex speaking Chinese.
你好，我可以视频，我做视频，对，我是外国人。我好好奇。我是美国人。我没有看过那个美国人。这第一次。
To add more nuance, the thing about language is that you can't actually say what someone's skill level is unless you're proficient in the language yourself. So after finding this video, I contacted my Chinese-speaking friend and she told me that his Chinese level is terrible. Though I will extend some respect because he does have a full video showing his ability to speak with native speakers, which is 10 times more than what that long-term tourist Chris Broad has done when it comes to speaking Japanese. But as for Alex, he can't even understand basic questions without a translator.
Well, I see jump.
今年多大了? How old are you?
我是26.
I was told his response was him effectively saying I is 26. So again, I appreciate the transparency, but this video wasn't made that long ago. If he's having trouble with how old are you, then he's a beginner and about 6 years of intense study from the kind of language skill it would take to be able to accurately comment on Chinese politics. But of course, this won't stop him from pretending that he is super fluent in Chinese and super knowledgeable about the culture.
Many Western leftist commentators will acknowledge Chinese achievements, but still feel the need to pander to liberal sensibilities and always put an asterisk besides their compliment. But the majority of these people have spent zero time in the actual countries they're speaking about, don't speak the language, nor understand the national conditions or culture of these places outside the West.
Every time these people do this shit, you guys have no idea how many people on social media pretend to be fluent in languages that they are either a beginner or an intermediate at. It's been a little over a year since Alex spoke Chinese in that video. There is no way he magically went from beginner to, I can pass college courses in Chinese now, in a year. That's a multi-year journey, and then after that, you would have to spend years educating yourself on these topics in Chinese. Outside of that, what are the odds that an incredibly small travel channel would move exclusively to making videos about how great China is and how much Westerners suck? Well, I mean, yes, the Hassan radicalization pipeline is a part of it, and Hassan does glaze China like crazy, including Mao.
I got stopped by a cop who thought I was like making fun of Mao Zedong, which I never would and never will. Mao Zedong is one of the great leaders of this world, okay? A man who changed the entire universe. The People's Republic of China would not exist without Mao Zedong.
I've also watched Alex run cover for Mao. Again, literally every video is him glazing China and shitting on the West. I mentioned that video where he is gleefully fantasizing about America losing a war with China. Bro, you live here. Why would you want your country to lose? And that's not the only video like that. Here he is again expressing absolute joy at the thought of the West collapsing.
The era of Western global domination is over. The global South has finally become powerful enough to match and even surpass the United States and its European allies in many ways. This revolution in world politics has become possible through the alliance of countries called BRICS, representing its founding members of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Really, this is an entire video of him promoting a Chinese-endorsed currency that is competitive to the dollar as a world currency. I don't think there are any morals behind this one. It's basically just an ad for China dollars. That's not the only advertising he does. Remember how we talked about how great he thinks solar panels are? Well, what are solar panels made of? Rare earth metals. Also, what do windmills need? That's right, rare earth metals. How about electric cars? Take a guess.
There are 4 specific rare earths that are used to make super strong permanent magnets that are used in motors for electric vehicles and for wind turbines. So that is key for most nations' zero carbon targets and cutting greenhouse gases.
In fact, a lot of our technology runs on them. Guess who won't shut up about China being the lead producer of this material?
All modern technologies, from batteries, electric vehicles, solar panels, to most importantly, all forms of modern weaponry, require large amounts of rare earth minerals. While they may be abundant across the globe, they are very difficult to refine into usable raw material for production. It's a long and environmentally destructive process that the US was happy to ship to China when the country wasn't viewed by the US as a threat. Now, however, China holds a near monopoly on both rare earth mineral extraction and mining. Rare earth minerals are the most important resource of the 21st century. Whether it be renewable energy, electric vehicles, or almost all forms of modern missiles and weaponry, you need rare earth minerals, and the BRICS alliance has a dominant 72% control of rare earth reserves. On top of that, even if the West has rare earth minerals, they have no capacity to refine them, as China alone controls 92% of all rare earth mineral refining, which is essentially a monopoly.
Wait, I thought monopolies are why capitalism is bad. I will also say when it comes to solar panels, for all the people, particularly on the left, who are asking why don't we invest more into this technology, another factor could be the fact that we don't have the infrastructure to build that amount of solar panels in the US, so an investment in solar is an investment in China, and we are currently enemies with China.
As renewable energy sources like solar, hydro, and wind are becoming more affordable and accessible, powering Africa's growing economies. China is a leader in these industries, and there are massive solar panel arrays in Morocco, Egypt, Kenya, and Zambia.
Not to say that this is the reason, I'm just saying that understand there are multiple factors at play here. For example, I'm a big fan of nuclear power, however, realistically, the startup capital is a lot, so other things get built, even if it's cheaper in the long term. So if we're trying to garner support for a new thing that we want, we need to understand the roadblocks and the costs versus benefits. Like I said, I am a fan of solar, but what I do find weird in this particular case is Alex's constant insistence on pushing people towards things that will make China a lot of money. It's a weird coincidence considering the context of the whole situation, not to mention him falsely framing Jeff Bezos as a conservative numerous times in his videos. What, is Amazon competitive with some Chinese online store? Is there some Chinese electric car company that's competitive with Tesla? Is that why he accused Elon of being a conservative despite Elon losing his shit over Americans being mad at H-1B legislation a while back? Alex is basically just saying that you're far right if you aren't a communist. But really, just like Jason from Living in China, my question is, how does Alex make a living? In one of his videos, he said that YouTube was his only income, and in a different video, he said that he lives in Washington, D.C. How does he afford that on a channel that only gets a few 100,000 views and a Patreon that makes very little? So when it's established that China pays for Westerners to make propaganda and I don't see a strong revenue source for a creator, I start to get very suspicious. Whether or not Alex is one of these white monkey influencers, I certainly think he's a traitor to the US, and if he loves China so much, he should go live there. Outside of this, I really think a reason why people do bad things is because they can't succeed otherwise, especially when it comes to content creation. Talentless individuals always try to cheat or use shortcuts to get ahead. Alex's videos aren't that hard to make. He's just doing top 10 lists on why Republicans suck that can be scripted in seconds. That's why Watch Mojo does the top 10 videos. They're super easy to write. His fact-checking ability is also garbage, and to add to my argument that he's lazy, his takes are very one-sided positions that lack critical thinking or nuance, which again makes his videos even easier to write because he doesn't have to take the time to think about how his opponents might try to invalidate his arguments. Usually people don't engage with this type of content because they find it boring.
Targets are those who are perpetuating
This video sucks. I don't think this video sucks at all.
systems of
I can't believe Hassan read that comment. That was the alt-right versus the radical left video, where he said that violence on the right is bad, but violence on the left is cool because they only attack Nazis. My point is that audiences typically don't like presentations that are like this, and contrary to popular belief, if you get numerous things wrong like Alex does, and I mean these things are obviously wrong, people won't watch you. Unless you're appealing to radicals. This is because usually radicalized groups have tons of free time to watch content because they aren't well socialized, so they don't have something that would take up a lot of their time like a job. And they're low in open-mindedness, so they very rarely view new ideas that are out of their comfort zone. And because of that, they will become obsessive and watch everything you make, as long as you say exactly what they believe and never step out of line. This is why so many people cater to the ghetto part of the black community, or the Free Palestine people, or the T part of LGBT, or college-educated white women. Those groups have massive communities of radicals. Going back to Hank Green, by the way, his appearance came from a video where he's laughing at solar panel roadways. But continuing his earlier point about simple solutions not working because things tend to be incredibly complex, I think he says something interesting here in reference to that.
Stories of big simple solutions, once they aren't implemented, either rely on you realizing that it's more complicated, or thinking that there's some super powerful cabal that's preventing us from doing the simple thing. Which is why a lot of the times conversation about big simple solutions interfaces with conspiracy theory.
Right, so what's happening here is that Alex says that the big simple solution to all of society's problems is just to give people more money. But that can't happen because the evil cabal called the Republican Party is standing in the way. I have to say that this type of argumentation set in front of the right group will make you shitloads of money. The book The 48 Laws of Power talks about how to trick people into giving you money with this line of thinking in reference to making a cult. The secret is to take advantage of people's desperation by providing some sort of cure-all, like saying that looking at moonlight for 10 minutes a day solves all of your problems, but only if you look at it through this special glass that no one wants you to know about, but conveniently, I happen to sell it. Then it'll be like $10 because that's the amount of money that people are most willing to part with, or it'll be horrendously overpriced because the high price will cause people to incorrectly assume that the snake oil is valuable. You can learn about that strategy in a book called Influence, and it's important to learn this stuff because these particular cult tactics are used very frequently. So people like Alex or Hassan Piker will take advantage of this psychology and not only hide the actual solutions to these people's problems. In fact, the 48 Laws of Power specifically tells you to try to manipulate people who don't want to do the real hard work that it takes to change. So people like this not only actively hide the actual solutions, but they will also attack people who provide the answers because, you know, if the black community listened to people like Andre Williams instead of calling him all sorts of names, they would actually improve and better their lives. And if that happened, grifters like Jasmine Crockett would lose all their money and power. Again, to re-emphasize, understand that people make insane amounts of money off this grift.
A lot of people, including probably your future employers or your current employers, they call me a lot of names. They say I'm an idealist, a radical, a terrorist. But the one thing that they don't call me is a liar.
Says the guy who's constantly called a liar. This has to be rage bait. There's no way he tried to get away with saying that after a huge drama where people called him out for denying that he shocked his dog on maximum voltage when he obviously did. So the way you prevent this grift is to foster a culture where people are told the truth. These people most often adopt radical behaviors because they aren't successful at getting what they want. Let me put it this way. I made a video about Chris Broad and Connor from Trash Taste living in Japan and not being able to speak Japanese despite being there and enjoying the amenities of that country for a very long time. And to their credit, Connor has probably spent 100 hours studying Japanese. That's a lot of work. Chris Broad has probably spent hundreds of hours working on his Japanese. Again, that's also a lot of work. But the problem is that fluency in Japanese takes thousands of hours of practice, not hundreds. And if you don't understand that conceptually, then you're going to have a very hard time building enough skill to get the things that you want in life, as well as along the way, there will be many people who will swipe money away from you by lying and saying that they have a simple solution to your problem, and especially in the language community, let me just say that people make disgusting amounts of money by lying and saying that their special course will make you fluent in 6 months, when in reality, fluency takes years of practice. Now, it kind of sucks to hear all of this because hundreds of hours of study sounds like a lot of work. That's already hard enough, and it's downright depressing to hear that the actual workload is 10 times that. But if you really think about it, if you just buckle down and do the hard work right away, you can save yourself years of time from failing over and over again by constantly trying to take shortcuts to get what you want. Think of how many people go on and off crash diets for like a decade or two, instead of just doing the long-term hard work of changing their lifestyle habits. Think about how oftentimes the people who are constantly trying to take shortcuts end up worse off than someone who just started out because they have to spend months unlearning bad habits that they adopted from previous failures. But as difficult as it sounds, it's not impossible. Success is a battle of endurance. The battle is enduring the multiple years that it takes to actually get good at a skill. However, with the right strategy, you can make this endurance challenge a lot easier. And the way you do that is just to try to incorporate your studying into as much of your everyday life as possible instead of setting up like a specific time to study each day. And the idea is that you get so good at this that you don't recognize you're even working. And I can easily get an hour or close to an hour of studying Japanese just by combining lessons with my morning routine. So just by waking up, I've already done an hour of work. Then if I need to set extra time aside, I can do that. But the point is to try to get as much done while you're doing other stuff so that you aren't sitting around at the end of the day saying, oh my God, I still have 3 hours of practice to do. You might survive doing that for a few months, but when it comes to stuff that takes multiple years to learn, you need to strategize more effectively, especially when your motivation gets tested by changing life circumstances. And last, you want to make it progressively easier and easier to access your study material so it's as close to one click away as possible, because you'll study a lot more if it only takes you 10 seconds to get to your material, as opposed to 10 minutes, so try to keep as much of your materials on your phone as possible. Anyway, thanks for watching, follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you in the next video.